Hello, fire weather fans. This is Heidi with your fire weather briefing for the week of May 13th for the eastern area. Still at PL2, both in eastern area and nationally. And we've seen that the southern area and southwest are at PL2. We've got our temperature trends to look at for the month of April, followed by the first week and a half of May. And you can see that where April was quite warm for most of the region, May has been a different story. A lot of much colder temperatures reaching down into the Ohio Valley, and you can see that numbers were in the 5 to even 7 below range, with some numbers up in the far northern parts of the Great Lakes states that's being almost 10 below normal. So it's been a cold start to the month. Precipitation trends for April, we remember that wet area kind of in the middle of the region with a little bit drier over towards the western side of Minnesota and Iowa, drier down through the Ohio Valley over into the mid-Atlantic and along the coast. Now for May, it's a very different story, extremely dry across the upper Midwest, with only a little strip just north of the Ohio Valley as being a little bit wetter up towards western New York. Otherwise, also very dry around the mid-Atlantic. And then up in the northeast, pretty wet for the state of Maine, but not so much as you get farther to the west there. For the precipitation over the last 7 days, there's been a little bit of shower activity across parts of Minnesota, Iowa, and into Wisconsin, as well as southern Michigan, but overall pretty wet in most other areas, with the heaviest band following north of the Ohio Valley and reaching up into the northeast. For warnings, watches, and advisories, we don't have much out this morning. We do have a fire weather watch that's out for not today, not tomorrow, but for Friday. So stay tuned as the winds pick up there once again. For today, you can see that we've got some warm temperatures in the west, though still cooler around Michigan and over into the northeast. Our minimum RHs, though, continue to be a story of very dry conditions throughout the west, wetter in the east, and with those dry conditions, we do see winds around southern Wisconsin over into Michigan and down into Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. Now, the fuels are not particularly dry in Michigan or Ohio, but we do have some eyes on the southern part of Wisconsin with the wind and the drier fuels there. Farther to the west, yes, fuels are dry, but the winds aren't as strong. So you can see on the significant fire potential where we've got the triggers for today in southern Wisconsin. Precipitation today likely to be in the east. That will keep those numbers down, although it does look like the northern portions of Maine may be on the drier side, so we've got a little bit of elevated concern there for the day too. Moving on to Thursday, you can see that it stays warm in the west, while in the east, temperatures remain cool, and that's lingering showers and cloud cover in that area with some pretty heavy rains expected in parts of eastern New York, over towards Maine, and down into the southern part of New England. For relative humidities, the footprint is very similar with dry conditions in the west, and it does look like winds are picking up with the next system that's coming through in western Minnesota and down into Iowa. So I've got wind triggers back in there for that western side. Otherwise, still that same general footprint of concern for much of the west. On Friday, we see even warmer temperatures coming into the western states, the Mississippi Valley looking at 90-degree temperatures, and more 80s pushing up into the southern part of Minnesota over into Wisconsin. So that, combined with these very low humidities across much of Minnesota down into Iowa, and the winds continuing to be pretty strong there out of the west, that keeps wind triggers in many of those same areas. There is some softening in Missouri and over into Illinois, so backing off any greater potential there. And the east, mostly staying on the damp side, though West Virginia does have some lower humidities for the daytime, so a little bit of yellow on the map for that area. Overall precipitation pretty minimal for the day on Friday, with a little band of showers here, maybe due to some thunderstorms as that rolls through. Looking at the medium range, we can see that this frontal system moves across much of the region through the weekend and into early next week, and that is bringing wetter weather with it as it comes through. So our 7-day outlooks are showing much wetter conditions throughout the west, and this is going to be the first opportunity for Minnesota and Wisconsin and Iowa to get much rain in the last few weeks. So this is a significant event. Confidence in the models is pretty good to start out. By the end of the weekend and into early next week, we'll have to see if all this rain does indeed come through, but the models have been alluding to it for a number of days now. For week 2, we can see that the temperature outlook is for warmer than normal conditions, especially over to the east, though holding on to slightly cooler temperatures in northern Minnesota for a few extra days before the warmer air gets there. And then for precipitation, overall, a little bit of a lean towards wetter than normal conditions, and this slightly darker green band puts us in the 40 to 50%. So it's a 50% chance of seeing wetter than normal conditions in those areas. The extended outlook hasn't changed. We still see this colder than normal lean for the month of May, and then shifting to equal chances for much of the Midwest and above normal for the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic. The precipitation outlook for May shows that drier than normal lean for the upper Midwest, but I think we're about past that as we get this shot of rain this weekend, and then we sort of move into this equal chances setup for the next few months. Fire potential outlook, I think you've all seen by now, we have this above normal potential for northern Minnesota for the month of May, and then things settle out into normal for the entire eastern area. We've had yet another wet week along the Ohio Valley and up into the Northeast. The Mid-Atlantic got a fair dose of rain, while over in Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, and even southern Michigan staying pretty dry with just a few showers that have happened in the last 24 hours. Confidence is becoming pretty good that in the next 7 days we're going to see some significant rain out there. You can see these blue colors are an inch or more for the most part, and the purple pushing up towards over an inch and a half and 2 inches. Today we do have a risk for severe thunderstorms, mainly reaching from western New York down through western Pennsylvania and into West Virginia, though there's a bigger footprint to see some showers and thunderstorms out on the landscape. The drought monitor, pretty similar to last week. We have those areas in Minnesota that are still dry, and then the southernmost part of our region looking pretty dry with West Virginia and the Mid-Atlantic all the way up to the Northeast having that moderate drought to perhaps severe drought in a few places. You can see the past drought monitors from a year ago in the upper left and 3 months ago in the lower right do show that overall conditions aren't half bad out there for the west compared to what we've seen, although in the east what we had a year ago was not this dry. However, we have moderated a bit from 3 months ago, and our outlook shows little change for most areas, although over in Maine, there should be a softening of conditions there. The Great Lakes Fire and Fuel site shows that we do have a good chance for spread potential in the next few days. Even today, where conditions have clearly softened, we still have some higher potential through southern Minnesota over into Wisconsin and down into Iowa. Tomorrow we're going with a higher level of spiciness, though, as we see these spread indices really jump right up with the stronger winds in the forecast and the fuels and humidity still being quite dry, and that carries through to Friday for much of western Minnesota. By Saturday, conditions moderate a little bit, but we still have a pretty good day for potential, and we've got eyes on much of Michigan as that area looks to be drying out a bit more by Saturday afternoon. The footprint of ERCs was quite a bit bigger yesterday and has moderated somewhat for today. However, we do still have some pretty high potential throughout the upper Midwest, and again today our focus is on that portion of Wisconsin with the stronger winds and humidities really coming to a crux there. We do see some higher potential along the western Ohio Valley and middle Mississippi for today, and we do expect to see these very high and extreme conditions continue through parts of the upper Midwest for another couple of days. The NASA Green Up map shows that we've got good green up in the south, and green up is progressing at a pretty good pace up through the northeast. Meanwhile, Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, even northern Michigan still pretty slow to green up, likely due to the cold temperatures there. To wrap things up, we've got fire potential in the very high range across parts of the upper Midwest throughout the week. Minnesota is going to be the area of focus due to their fuel conditions and the fact that they've not had much precipitation. There's a little bit of softening today in some of those areas, but tomorrow we see a rapid return to very high and extreme conditions. Meanwhile, in the south and east, overall we've got some pretty low conditions because fuels have greened up and there have been periods of rain. In the next week, temperatures are going to warm up quite a bit, especially over the weekend. And you can see the temperature map here for next Monday with 90s across a good swath of the southern two-thirds of our area of interest. And at the same time, significant moisture comes through. So numbers will drop across much of the region, leaving just a few areas in the northeast that haven't fully greened up yet as having a little higher concern by early next week. That concludes our fire weather briefing for today. Thanks for listening and have a great week.